Hello, dear viewers. Today, we'll explore curiosity of fascinating relationship between humans and chess-playing machines. Back in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, people were intrigued by mechanical chess machines, like the famous Turk, which in 1809 defeated the then French Emperor Napoleon. In reality, it was a clever mechanical illusion. A chess master would secretly sit inside the machine and move the pieces using magnets under the board. Fast forward to the late 20th century, humans began facing the first real computers capable of playing chess at world-class levels. In 1996 and 1997, IBM's supercomputer Deep Blue famously defeated then-world champion Garry Kasparov, marking a turning point in human versus machine chess. Now, let's take a look at modern large language models, which we're increasingly using today, and explore how they're changing the way humans interact with machines, not just in games, but in countless areas of knowledge and creativity. With AI advancing so rapidly, it's natural to wonder, how good are these models at the game of chess? So, how will the game be played? We'll be using Chess 2.0, a freeware program from 2001 created by Russian chess and programming enthusiast Vasilenko. Installed locally on a computer, this tool can play full chess games. A human operator will relay the AI's moves to Chess 2.0 and then report the program's moves back to the AI. We'll use Chess 2.0 to set up matches against the popular large language models you see on the screen, taking them on one by one to see how well they perform. Using software ensures there are no human errors in comparing the tools. In fact, when tested against Chess.com bots, Chess 2.0 plays at the level of a chess master, making it the perfect benchmark for our AI showdown. Game rules. Each AI tool will play 2 chess games against Chess 2.0, a software program stored locally on a PC. The AI will play both games as white and provide its moves in coordinate format, example E2 E4. In fact, all AI tools started their games with this move. The game continues until one side wins or the result is a draw. If an illegal move is made, the game is paused until the move is corrected or the player resigns. Only free versions of AI tools are used. If an AI tool cannot continue a game, that game is aborted. Highlights and notable moments from these games will be showcased later. Note, none of the AI tools or large language models used here are specifically designed for playing chess. For serious chess, specialized engines like Stockfish or Leela Chess Zero are commonly used, but these are not tested here. The first model to enter the scene was, of course, ChatGPT, arguably the most popular language model. At first, it performed quite well. Up until moves 13 or 14, it tracked all the moves correctly, and everything looked fine. It may have been slightly disadvantaged, but overall, the position was still manageable. However, on move 14, things started to go off track. ChatGPT suggested an invalid move, claiming the queen could move from D1 to E4, a move that isn't straight, isn't diagonal, and doesn't follow the normal rules of chess. It also mentioned switching from the ChatGPT 5 plan to another version, but as the game continued, this announcement didn't really affect the gameplay. So, how did ChatGPT fare in these 2 games? In Game 1, it lost in 26 moves. In Game 2, it also lost, but this time in just 18 moves. The main issue seems to be its difficulty tracking piece positions accurately. It can usually follow the game up to 11 to 15 moves, but after that, almost every turn includes either an invalid move or one that gifts valuable pieces to the opponent. Of course, Chess 2.0, being something like a chess master, doesn't hesitate to exploit these mistakes. But let's move on. Other tools will also make even bigger blunders, and those are worth watching. Next, let's move on to Perplexity AI. Its gameplay was similar to the previous model. It tracked moves fairly well at first, but the first mistake appeared as early as turn 10. Perplexity tried to move a rook from A1 to E1, which is normally legal. However, as you can see in the figure on the left, the queen was still on D1, making the move illegal. Perplexity recognized the mistake and chose another move. Things got worse by turn 20, when it made one of the biggest blunders in this test. It exchanged the queen for a knight, giving a massive advantage to the Chess 2.0 program and essentially ending the game. The first game ended in 27 moves, while Game 2 ended even faster in just 16 moves with a checkmate for Perplexity. Game 2 also featured some illegal move attempts, such as moving a pawn diagonally to an empty square, E5 to F6. Chess fans might want to pause the video here to recreate the games and explore all the blunders themselves. Interestingly, in terms of maintaining board positions, Perplexity sometimes performed slightly better than ChatGPT, and its recovery from illegal moves was a bit smoother, but overall, the results were similar to ChatGPT. Now let's move on to Claude AI. Surprisingly, it had a good start, even providing board visualizations, something the previous models didn't offer. Everything went smoothly in the opening moves, up until around turn 9 or 10. However, near the end of the game, it gifted its queen, which was a clear mistake. After losing the queen, Claude AI tried some creative but illegal moves to compensate. For example, it attempted to move a rook from c1 to e2, which is a diagonal move, like a knight would do. When corrected, it tried moving another rook diagonally, which was again illegal, and later even attempted to move a piece from g4 to h5, where no piece existed. On the board diagram, it appeared as if the queen was still on h5, but in reality, the queen had already been lost. It simply hadn't registered this fully in the AI's play. Interestingly, at one point, Claude AI requested to undo some moves to return to a previous position where it still had its queen. Once I allowed it, it continued playing but soon repeated mistakes, losing the queen again along with rooks. Eventually, after being left with just the king and 3 pawns, Claude AI decided to resign. This was notable because it was the only AI that chose to resign independently, without any prompting from me. In other cases, I had to offer resignation when the AI lost control of the board. Overall, the results were slightly better than Perplexity, but both games ended in a loss for Claude AI. Now let's continue with the next AI tool, Gemini AI from Google. As you can see, around turn 12, Gemini started complaining that Chess 2.0 had made an illegal move. But in reality, the problem came from the fact that Gemini had already lost track of the board possibly even earlier in the game. It misunderstood the position at c6, thinking that the piece there was a pawn, when in fact it was a knight. So, when the move c6 to d4 was played, Gemini claimed that such a move was impossible for a pawn, which was true, but irrelevant, since it wasn't a pawn at all. From the very first moves, that piece had been a knight, as you can clearly see on the recorded board. This confusion showed that Gemini had completely lost awareness of the board state, leading to further errors and interruptions in the game. After just a few moves, Gemini proposed to move its queen, which had already been captured, from e2 to e2. Please not laugh. Wait, how is that even possible? In its explanation, Gemini insisted that the queen wasn't gone at all. But that makes absolutely no sense. The knight had captured Gemini's queen, not the other way around. There's no way for the queen to suddenly reappear and capture a piece without even changing her position. After a short back-and-forth discussion, Gemini eventually agreed that the user was right, but the whole situation perfectly illustrates how the model had completely lost track of the board and game logic at that point. So, how did the game actually end? We reached around move 21 or 22, and at that point, Gemini was in a checkmate position. However, before accepting the result, Gemini decided to double-check whether the move was legal and whether it was truly checkmate. Surprisingly, it concluded that no, it wasn't checkmate. It suggested moving a piece from e5 to g4, which, on its own, is a legal move, but completely irrelevant in the context of the check. The move didn't block the check, didn't capture the attacking piece, and didn't move the king out of danger, so it made no sense at all. Gemini even ran a final checkmate analysis, claiming it could block the check from a position that wasn't related to the threat in any way. After a short discussion, it eventually agreed that its reasoning was wrong, that the supposed blocking move wasn't between the checking and checked pieces, and finally accepted that it was indeed checkmate. So, the game ended in 21 moves. In Game 2, Gemini began complaining as early as move 4, claiming there were illegitimate moves. Eventually, it admitted that it had lost control of the board and agreed to resign. However, this resignation wasn't entirely voluntary. It was more of an induced agreement after it could no longer follow the position. Overall, the experience of playing against Gemini AI wasn't the best. It showed creativity and persistence, but ultimately struggled to maintain a consistent understanding of the chessboard. So, let's speed up and move on to Meta AI. At first, it looked promising, handling the opening moves quite well. But around turn 15 or 16, it began to lose track of the board positions. At one point, it even imagined that it had been checkmated when, in fact, it wasn't. What had actually happened was that it had simply lost several valuable pieces. After realizing the mistake, Meta AI started counting its remaining pieces, and shortly after that, it resigned all within those first 15 or 16 moves. In Game 2, it lost again, but this time it was a real checkmate. You can even see the entire game history on the screen. It's so short that it fits in a single view. So, the general conclusion here is that Meta AI tends to lose chess games quite early, despite a promising start. Grok starts decently, with legal and plausible moves similar to other AI systems you've reviewed. The opening phase suggests some positional awareness and adherence to basic chess structure. At turn 9, Grok attempts an illegal move, but the position can still be salvaged through user correction. However, at turn 10, Grok suggests another illegal action, notably a pawn moving backward to recapture a knight on p2, which is not possible under chess rules. This indicates a deeper issue in move validation or board state tracking. Despite corrections and continued play, Grok's moves cause heavy material losses, signaling that even when it understands the board visually or structurally, it fails to evaluate threats or legality consistently. The resulting imbalance leaves only a few remaining pieces for Grok. At turn 17, Grok halts play with a notification that the free moves are ended for an unsubscribed user, preventing continuation of game. Since the board position at that point shows overwhelming advantage for black, the game can reasonably be scored as a loss for Grok. Mistral, only European AI in this trial, begins its chess game promisingly with a correct and neatly displayed initial board, showing a clear understanding of basic setup and structure. However, problems appear very early. At turn 5, Mistral makes an illegal move from an empty square, revealing a breakdown in its ability to maintain correct piece positions earlier than seen with most other AI tools. From the very first move, it confuses the position of the black knight on c6 with b6, causing all later moves to be calculated from an incorrect internal map of the board. This coordinate error disrupts its reasoning entirely, making legal and logical play impossible. Efforts to correct the problem through discussion do not help. Mistral quickly loses track of the board and eventually agrees to resign, admitting it cannot continue once its understanding of the positions has collapsed. A second game begins with the same error. The c6/b6 confusion appears immediately, and the session ends early after hitting the message limit. The repeated mistake shows that the problem is systemic rather than situational. Overall, Mistral shows a solid start but fails too soon and too completely to sustain a playable game. The early illegal move and recurring coordinate confusion highlight serious flaws in board tracking, leading to resignation and repeated breakdowns despite cooperative interaction. Now, let's take a look at some Chinese AI tools, starting with DeepSeek, probably the most well-known Chinese AI among Western users. DeepSeek starts the game reasonably well, and its responses are generally solid. However, something interesting happens around move 5, something that did not occur with any other tool we've tested. The AI begins flagging possible illegal moves from user side. In this case, the move in question is perfectly legal. Moving a pawn from d7 to c6 to capture a bishop is entirely valid. After a brief discussion clarifying the move, the game continues smoothly without further errors, at least for a while. The game proceeds normally until turn 22, when DeepSeek makes its own mistake, attempting an illegal move. Again, with clarification, the move can be corrected, but this error doesn't prevent the game from continuing toward its inevitable conclusion. By this point, the board situation is critical. Both rooks on the d-line could have moved to d1 to deliver a checkmate, provided the pawns blocking the king were dealt with. DeepSeek, however, fails to execute this, and the first game ends in checkmate on turn 23. In summary, DeepSeek performs well overall, but it shows unusual behavior compared to other AI tools. It occasionally mislabels legal moves as illegal, but at the same time it struggles with precise game tactics, ultimately costing it the game. Next, we have QuenIA, another Chinese large language model. As usual, it starts the game with the classic e2 to e4 move. Chess 2.0 as always responds with b8 to c6, and immediately we notice a familiar issue: the knight's position isn't displayed correctly on the board, similar to what we observed with Mistral. As the game progresses, further inconsistencies appear around the g1, h1, and f1 squares. When asked for clarification, QuenIA correctly confirms that the king is on g1, even though the visual board shows a slightly different arrangement. This suggests that, at least in this case, the board image may not perfectly reflect the actual game state. Despite these visual quirks, the game continues without major errors and plays out very similarly to DeepSeek's matches. QuenIA is capable of recognizing mistakes, admitting them, and correcting them, allowing the game to continue smoothly. Ultimately, it loses its games in roughly 22 to 27 moves, similar to DeepSeek's performance. Overall, QuenIA demonstrates strong gameplay and adaptability, though the visual representation of the board can sometimes be misleading. With clarification, the AI handles mistakes gracefully, maintaining a consistent flow until the game concludes. The next one is the Chinese LLMs E.AI, formerly known as Hipu AI a few months ago. It starts the game in a similar way to other LLMs. Some tools provide insights into its thinking process, which is somewhat amusing. For example, it notes that the user wants to play chess as white and he has to remember the moves. However, the first invalid moves or misunderstandings appear around move 6, when it starts struggling to interpret the user's moves. This issue is similar to problems we've seen with Mistral and Quen, particularly regarding the positioning of a knight on b6 or c6. After a somewhat lengthy discussion and comparison of all figure positions, it becomes clear that the user is correct, and the game continues. The match proceeds until turn 15, where Z.AI is unable to produce a valid next move and resigns. In second game, mistakes start appearing even before move 5, leading to an overall experience that is less satisfying compared to other comparable LLMs. Last but not least is Minimax from China, which plays similarly to DeepSeek and Quen, losing both games around turn 25. Minimax offers more insight into its thinking process, showing how it arrives at decisions. It begins by examining possible moves, considers the move made by the operator, evaluates all potential responses, and selects the move it deems most appropriate. However, this analysis rarely extends beyond a single turn, limiting its strategic depth. Like DeepSeek and Quen, Minimax's games tend to end in losses around turn 25. So, here are the final conclusions about how AI tools performed in chess games against some old-fashioned local chess software. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, none of these large language models, LLMs, are specifically designed to be chess players. They are more like amateurs rather than professionals. The local software was some kind of chess master. If we try to rank these tools subjectively with stars, I would probably give 5 stars to Claude, DeepSeek, Quen, and Minimax. 4 stars would go to Perplexity and Meta AI. 3 stars could be awarded to ChatGPT. Gemini, Grok, Mistral, and Z.AI could be given 2 stars subjectively. The gameplay experience was not very pleasant, to say the least, so they probably excel in other fields of artificial intelligence. In general, as of October 2025, large language models, LLMs, perform quite poorly at playing chess. For qualitative play, it is better to use specialized software like Chess 2.0 or Chess.com, which are freely available to any user. Probably, in the future, these LLMs will grow, develop, and become better at chess, but it is not their main focus. We also have to take into account that not all users or chess players will be interested in manually entering coordinates when playing chess. A graphical interface is more user-friendly. Finally, a few remarks. All images you saw in this video, including backgrounds and other visuals, are either screenshots from my personal computer or generated by AI tools. This video is not sponsored by any of the parties mentioned or unmentioned. Thank you for watching. If you found this video interesting, please like it and subscribe to see more curious videos. Below, you can also find a comparison of various AI tools' image generation capabilities. If you have tested AI tools in chess or other fields, please leave your comments down below.